Alright everyone, welcome back. So, in the last lecture we worked on routing, and now in this lecture we're going to keep on working on further splitting our app into components, right? Because this is going to help us have a more modular application, alright? So the next thing that we need to do is we're going to go to components, and then we're going to go to project board. Now in project board, if you guys pay attention to the comments that I kept here on purpose, you'll see that in right over here we have a sample project task. All right, and what I want to do is actually extract this. What we need to do is extract this out of here, because then as we start creating and actually getting our project tasks from the server, we're gonna need to have something that's more dynamic than us obviously just hard coding this here the way it is. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to cut out of here. All right, and then if I save this and if I run my server, let me just reopen my terminal. Sorry guys, I was working on creating the branches for you. So if I do npm start, then this is gonna start up, and you're gonna see that you're gonna see that the board is now gonna be empty. It's not gonna have any project tasks in it, and there you go, right? Because I just cut off that card, or that bootstrap card that conform the project task that we had here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're gonna open our project explorer here, and then we're going to go into the project task folder, and in our project task folder we're just going to create a new component which is going to be called the project task item, and this is basically the individual project task item.js. Perfect. And this one's also going to be a class-based component. All right, I'm just going to save this, do my usual refactoring here. Again, as we start working with state and whatnot, you guys will see why I prefer to do it this way. Again, remember with React, there are many patterns, if you will. I'm just following how I learned it. And I might have made a mistake, because then I copy and pasted that, and then I lost the code that I cut from here, but nothing to worry about, because I can just go back to it, then cut it again, right? And then put it here. All right, and now I'm gonna save this, and I'm gonna save this over here, and nothing special is gonna happen, right? We're gonna get the same empty board. But now if I put this right over here, and then right between here I actually import the project task item. And remember, I have auto import, so you guys would have, if you guys don't have auto import, then you have to come up here and type this out. All right, so now with that in place, I'm just gonna save it, and there you go, right? We have our project task item here. And just for kicks, I'm just gonna copy and paste this, and perhaps add one in each one of the columns. Now this is the in progress column, and very important, make sure that you add it in the call -md-4, like right here in the, say, the last div. All right, because if you put it over here, then it's just gonna look really bad. So just make sure that you're paying attention, and that this little group here, that you add it right here, right above the last div of the call md-4 column. All right, this is very important. And then if I bring this back here, as you guys can see, now we have this one over here, and you can do the same with the done one if you want. I'm just gonna leave it like that for now. All right, cool. So now we have broke that into let's say another component that we're gonna need, and now let's keep on working on actually getting some stuff done, right? Because we've been working an awful lot on layout stuff. All right, so I think what I want to work on next, if you guys give me a second, I think what I want to work on next is perhaps start wiring things up for our API call. I think that that would be a really nice next step, because right now we want to start seeing our React application actually interacting with our backend. All right, so I'm just gonna go here, open something real quick, and yeah, perfect. So the first thing that we want to do in order for us to start passing data onto our API is that we want to make the form, the add project task form, we want to turn this into a controlled component. A control component, you know, I'm not going to give you the super textbook definition. All I'm going to say is that the control component in the context of a form, it is basically making sure that all the input that the user puts in the form fields comes, or it's controlled by the state of the component. All right, so basically we are getting the value in the input field from the state, and this is very important because this makes the state the single source of truth, and it also allows us to manage the state of the component, especially when we have errors. Okay, so don't worry guys if that explanation didn't suffice. I'm pretty sure that as we start coding this, you guys will understand more and more what it is a control component. So let me just make some room here. Okay, so first of all, in our form, and actually why don't I navigate to our form so I can show you. In our form, we have three fields. We have the project task summary, we have the acceptance criteria, and we have the status. And right now, as you guys can see, we can type on it, okay? But this is gonna change very quickly, and you guys will see in a few minutes. Okay, so, excuse me. The first thing that we wanna do is that we want to make sure that the name attribute in each of the input fields corresponds to the same attribute that we have in our project object. Okay, so I already did this pre-work, right, when I created the forms, but basically this name equals summary. It's exactly the same attribute that we have in our project task object on the Spring Boot server, right? And it has to be the same, not only the name, but also in terms of casing, right? Like this cannot be, let's say, a capital S, or there can be a capital A here, or it cannot be all caps. All right, it has to be exactly the same. Same with status and acceptance criteria. All right, so now what we're gonna do, the first thing that we're gonna do to actually make this a control component is actually assign it an initial state, and for this we need a constructor. And I'm gonna put super here because, as you guys see, we're extending component. Okay, so that's why we need super here. All right, so then I'm gonna use the following keyword, this.state, and basically what I'm going to do is set all those fields to blank. All right, so now let me do this first. Then we have acceptance criteria, and then we have status. Okay, so now we're setting the state for this, and then what we want to do is also link the value of the input field to the state, and this is the first step we're going to take. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say value, and we're going to say this.state.summary. The same thing we're going to do all the way down here. Value this.state.acceptance criteria, and the same at the very bottom, or with the status value, and again this.state.acceptance criteria. Perfect. So now with that in place, if we go back to our form, you guys are not going to be able to type anything, because right now the value in the input fields is actually tied up to the state, and it's no longer tied up to this event right here of us typing anything. All right. So now what we need to do is actually handle the change, right? Because we need to basically set the new state to the input fields every time the user types anything on the form, right? And for this, we need to create a new function, which we're gonna create right here above the render method, and this function is gonna be called onChange. All right. And then what we're gonna say is that we're gonna say this.setState. And then here, this syntax might look a little weird to you if this is the first time that you're doing React. But basically what we're gonna do is that we're gonna say e, or in the case of an event, .target.name. And what we mean with name here is the name of each of the input fields. Then we assign whatever value is in that target. Okay, so basically imagine this is an array of targets, right, of all the targets in this JSX, and then each one, depending on how they change, then it's just going to assign the value that you're typing. So yeah, you can do this one by one. Yes, you totally could, but then that's kind of tedious. It's better to just do it here by using the name attribute and then assigning the value that you guys are providing. All right, so we're not done here. Now that we have this, then we have to bind this function to each one of the input fields. And I apologize for the background noise. I live close to the train tracks, and every time I'm recording, the train has to go by. It's just my luck, right? I swear to God, like it's very uncommon, but every time I'm recording, bang, there's a train. All right, so what you're gonna do, and the funniest thing is that it's usually the longest trains ever. Anyway, we're gonna do here onChange, and then we're just gonna right under the the placeholder, in this case here, right under the value, but it has to be right in the input field. Okay, so it's gonna say this.onChange on the summary, on the acceptance criteria, and then right here on the status. All right, then we're gonna save this, but this is not all we need to do. Now the other thing that we need to do is that we need to bind this to each one of the input fields, and for this we can actually come to the constructor and then say this.onChange equals this.onChange bind this. All right, and basically this is binding the function to each one of the input fields. Now that this is in place, then we are going to be able to actually fill out our form. And I must have done something wrong here because it's not allowing me to pick that one up. Let me see. Give me just a moment. Yeah, there's something that is not liking there. So this I don't change, this on change, and then onChange, this onChange. All right, so really not sure what it is that is not liking there. All right, so let's just troubleshoot it together. No biggie. Actually, why don't I check my console log and see if I have any issues here. It doesn't seem that there's anything blowing up right now, but still it's not letting me. All right, let me see 1 second. I'm pretty sure a lot of you were like, what are you doing, dude? I'm pretty sure a lot of you actually saw it. I was using the wrong parameter here. And that's a lesson learned for all of you. Don't be careful when you copy and paste stuff, right? And now it works. And this is great. All right. So then the next thing that we want to do is actually create what we need so that we can actually submit this to the server. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a very simple mid step in which we're just going to create the onSubmit, and then we're just going to console log the say object that we're trying to submit to the server, thereby making sure that what we're getting from the form not only works, but also that we're getting it in a format that we can actually send back to the server. All right, so here what we're going to do is say onSubmit, and we're going to pass an event parameter, and then we're going to say prevent default The reason why we're using this ePrevent default is because we want to make sure that when we click submit, it doesn't refresh the page. Remember, the default say behavior of submit of this when you click a submit button is to actually refresh the page, and we want to avoid that. All right, so this is what we're using this here. Then what I'm going to say is const new project task, right? And then we're going to create a new object. Now this is what this is where things start making a little more sense, because what we want to do is literally we want to grab this here, and this is the object that we're constructing, obviously, and then all I'm going to do is going to say this dot state, and then I'm just going to give them their individual attributes. Summary, this one's obviously acceptance criteria, and this one's obviously status. Now as you can see, guys, we start with an initial state which is blank, right? Then we set the state every time there's a change, and then before we submit, we take whatever is in the state, right? And obviously if there's anything that cannot be blank, it will throw an error. But the thing is that every time you type in the form, you're setting a different state, right? Each one of the input fields has a different state, and then we're taking whatever's in that state to persist to the server. And actually I'm going to show you, I really want to show you. Go to your React dev tool, right? And then if you guys come here and then you scroll down all the way to the add project task form, and then if you park here, you're going to see again the three parameters that we're assigning as blank. So this corresponds to this, obviously, over here. And then when I start typing on summary, you see, and on status, and here you see how the state changes. Now whenever we do on submit, then what we pass on to the server is whatever's in the state, which is right here. So as I mentioned, like this React dev tool, it's really handy, so that's why I'm asking you guys to please go get it if you haven't done so yet. All right, but see, this is exactly what we're going for. Now that we have that for now, and just for now, we're just gonna console log. We're just gonna console log our new project task. All right, and then there's one more step that we have left, which is to obviously bind the onSubmit function to our form. All right, and for those of you that, well, all of you should know the basics of HTML, and as you know, a form usually has an action. In this case, this is the equivalent to giving this form the action, right? It's going to be the onSubmit, and before this actually works at all, we also have to bind this at the constructor level. There's obviously an explanation for this, but right now this is, like, as I mentioned, this is just a quick tutorial on using these three technologies together: Spring Boot, React, and Redux. In my course, in my Udemy course, I go a little deeper into this, but remember, we're just doing this in the context of a practical little project, so I'm not really gonna go deep into the basics of React, okay? But basically what we're doing here is binding this to the form, so every time we submit, every time we submit, this actually takes the values from here and actually creates that object that in the end we're going to end up passing to the backend. All right, so now I'm just going to show you something, and I really want to showcase this once again, because if I come here to the app project task, then I'm just going to say new task, and you can see the state changing on the bottom right corner. Then new acceptance criteria, and we're gonna say that this one is obviously into there. And then when I click on submit, then we get our object here, and this is exactly what we want to pass on to our backend, and this is great. All right, so this is where I'm gonna wrap things up for now. So we are, say, halfway there somehow, but in the next lecture what we want to do is then finally send this criteria, send this to the server, and then actually at that point we want to see it in our database. Right, thank you guys, talk later.